everybody. I hope everyone is having a great day, whether you are 5 hours away or a day away. Remember, I love you. Okay, y'all, so I want to talk a little bit about a topic that I've been seeing on my timeline for years, actually, and this is something where I've actually added my 2 cents with, because I feel, even though I am not particularly a part of this community, I just find it quite disrespectful to keep attacking a group of people who you don't necessarily surround yourself with, or you don't really know about outside of what you may have encountered through a few people or through the media. And there's just so much ignorance from both sides that I felt that I needed to talk about this, because this is something that I actually did not quite understand until 2014, when I started interacting with other groups of Black people around the world, and a lot of Black people followed me for my content that I posted on my old Tumblr account. So what I am actually discussing is Afro-Latinx identity and other Black people's identity that may be questioned based off of ignorance of what people perceive a Black person to be, or because they may not necessarily know about a particular group of people outside of what they hear in the media. And we like to talk about how people judge African Americans based off of what they hear on the media, but we in turn do the same thing to a lot of Latinx that are Black, that are of direct African descent, and we assume because they speak Spanish or they are from a country that may not acknowledge Blackness that they aren't Black. And I feel that we are participating in colonizer ideology when we deny people like Cardi B as Black women, or someone like Evelyn Lozada. And you can feel however you want about those women. I'm not necessarily a fan of Cardi B because of stuff she had said about dark-skinned Black women in the past, fat women, trans women, gay people. She has made ableist comments also. She had actually also made anti-Semitic comments. So I'm not particularly fond of Cardi B when it comes to that, but I'm also not someone that's going to deny her Blackness just because I don't like her, because whether you like Cardi B or not, there are other people like Cardi B that are proud of their Blackness, who are not anti-Black and have never did anything harmful to other Black people. So I think it's just fair to try to understand where other people are coming from, instead of just assuming that because you heard one thing about them, that means that's how it is all the time. Just because you dealt with Dominicans that said they weren't Black, even though they were clearly Black, that's not the case with every Dominican, because Dominicans always knew that they were Black, at least the Black Dominicans, because not every Dominican is Black. But in places like the Dominican Republic or Colombia or Cuba or Venezuela, they have a high population of people of African descent, people who are Black, people who identify as African. They may not say I am a Black person, but from my experience, a lot of Dominicans have told me that they were African. They just weren't Black. So they do acknowledge that they are of African descent. They just may not look at race the same way as we do, because we are African Americans. And historically, we were racialized as Black, where everybody else around the world was seen as African. And now people are kind of understanding that Black is just more of a substitute for African, as in we are all of indigenous African descent. But because of the African diaspora and how we were racialized, it may be different to other people depending on ethnic groups and nationality. There are even indigenous North Africans where we may look at them as Arab, but a lot of them are not Arab and they do not identify as Arab. They don't have any genetic ties or ancestry to the Middle East, but there's this misconception that because you look a certain way that it must mean that you're not African, or you may not identify as a Black African or someone that may be of Black African descent, because there are people who are racialized as non-Black, but they are still indigenous to Africa. We're racialized as Black because of historically coming from people of dark or Black skin, and then we are now a diverse group of people that may have light skin, dark skin, brown skin, but Black comes from the racialization of dark-skinned Africans, because people saw that some Africans were very dark-skinned or they went to certain ethnic groups where the community was primarily dark skinned, so white settlers assumed that they were black people when they were just a diverse ethnic group. And Africa is a place where you can be light skinned, you can have straight hair, you can be indigenous to Africa, but because of racialization, people assume that being African means that you're black. And we know that there are settlers in Africa that aren't black or aren't indigenous. But now that we kind of have a better understanding of blackness, it's not just one monolith. So when it comes to discussing Afro-Latinx as blackness, I think it's xenophobia. I think if they were not Latinx, you wouldn't be debating it. If they were African American, you would assume that Cardi B was a light-skinned black woman from a multiracial family. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. And Bad Dominicana, who I follow on Twitter and who has a Tumblr account and an Instagram account, she has mentioned before, we consider Tracee Ellis Ross black. We consider so many women that are also racially ambiguous or can pass as non-black women, and because they are African American, we don't really question that. But then we have someone like Cardi B or Evelyn who are clearly black, and we are all of a sudden confused because they're Latinx or they speak Spanish or they identify as Latinas. People did the same thing with Jocelyn Hernandez, who is clearly a black woman. She is a brown-skinned black woman, and people assume that she's not black because, oh, well, she says that she's Puerto Rican and she may not racially identify as black, even though you can look at the woman and see that she's black. People did that with Amara Negra, where they assumed that she was cosplaying as a black woman or she was cosplaying the African American experience, and they were exotifying her. And I don't really like that because I have so many people in my family who look similar to those women. I even joked about how Celia Cruz and my family probably are from the same tribe. We were just dispersed because Celia Cruz reminds me of my grandma in the face, like the nose, the skin tone, like the smile. Like, I like to call her Grandma Celia Cruz because she really does look like my grandma if my grandma was an Afro-Latina. Rest in peace to all those women. You know, Aretha Franklin also reminded me of my grandma, and that's why I kind of love these women, because my grandma grew up with their music and my grandma was a fan of music like that. So I just never understood why people acted as if Dominicans or Cubans or Colombians that have black people aren't black. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying like every Dominican or every Cuban or every Colombian or every Mexican or every Venezuelan or Panamanian are black people, but these are countries that have a high population of black people. Same thing with Brazil, where they have a high population of black people. I think out of every country in the Americas, I believe that Brazil has the highest population of people of African descent. And I always say that I love like samba and I love classic bossa nova. I love music from Brazil that is oriented in black culture and the African diaspora, because I feel connected with their music. I feel connected with the roots. I feel like, okay, these are my people. They're just from another country, they're from another culture, but we are all black and we're all talking about our roots. Sure, some of us may have been colonized by the Spanish, some of us may have been colonized by the English or the Dutch. At the end of the day, we are all black people and we do have different cultures. We do have different languages, but it's just not fair to say Afro-Latinx aren't black people just because you may have dealt with some anti-black people. Just like it's not fair to say African Americans have no culture just because you dealt with a group of African Americans who may have acted like they were better than Caribbeans or native Nigerians or other Afro-Latinx. You know, you can't really generalize. And I don't really like African diaspora wars where we are constantly at each other's throats instead of dismantling white supremacy altogether. You know, I'm someone that embraces all cultures. I really love getting to know other people. If I were to find out that you were Dominican or you were Jamaican or Haitian or another group, I would be excited because I like meeting different cultures. I like meeting different people. Just hanging out with one group of people is boring. Like, I feel if I only knew people from my own ethnic group, black people in particular, I'd be bored. Black people are so diverse. So that's basically what I wanted to say, that you may not like Cardi B, but Cardi B is still a black woman. You may not like Evelyn, but they're still black women, because you can't just say, oh, well, I only acknowledge mixed or light-skinned people that are good people and they aren't colorists, because, you know, I've seen it with my own eyes that even the nice mixed people are denied of their blackness. Even the nice light-skinned people are denied of their blackness. So which one is it? One minute you're saying that it's about phenotype, but we have women like Evelyn and Cardi B who are phenotypically black, and now all of a sudden, oh, well, their parents look like this, their parents look like that. So it's like you're moving goalposts, and it's like the argument is that you want to limit blackness, and you're making all of these excuses as to why you want to do that. I'm not taking up for colorism. I'm not taking up for light skin privilege. I'm not taking up for mixed people who are anti-black. But fair is fair. You have to acknowledge that people are black, and I think this is important to talk about, and this is something that I care about, because I'm not going to listen to someone that's complaining about being called pretty for a black girl, or being told that they're not black because they have good hair or because they're light skinned. That's petty to me. But when it's something unprovoked, as like you don't consider somebody black just because of how they look and they are clearly black, that's when I care, because that's really ignorant. People have all types of people in their family. We have diverse people. That's how we preserve our race, because of light skinned and dark skinned people intermixing with one another, because of multiracial intermingling with full Africans that were not of direct European descent. And that's why our families have survived, because of that. That's why we are still black, because we consider people that may be lighter skinned or maybe multiracial black. That's how our communities have flourished, because of the fact that we didn't just separate each other by one category. We all decided we're all African, we are going to preserve our culture. And that's what it was like in African American communities, where light-skinned people, you know, dated and married dark-skinned people, and vice versa, because not every group of people that is light-skinned is colorist, or don't want to date somebody because they are dark-skinned. And I will say most of them are like that, or a lot of people are, but I'm not going to go as far as to say that every light-skinned or every biracial black person is a self-hater, because you don't know everyone's families. So that's basically all that I have to say for now, and I want everyone to have a great day.